Shalom again, everyone. This is Rabbi Stuart Dowerman from Interfaithfulness, where we're building bridges, where history builds walls. And we're nearing the end of our discussion of this book you see up in the corner of your screen, When the Church Was a Family, by Joseph H. Hellerman. It's a very good book. It's a doctoral work that he did, and he's very serious about it. And he argues for what we call a strong group family as the model for congregational life. Today, I want to look with you at one of the dangers inherent in this model. I used to live in San Francisco. I remember one time I was out on the street and a fellow came by me and we engaged in conversation, religious conversation, and he was glowing. There was something spooky about him. I asked him where he went to services. He said, "Oh, People's Temple." For all I know, that man died in the jungles of Guyana. That was a very strong group. Very strong sense of insider-outsider, very strong sense of group solidarity, group loyalty, taking care of each other. And it was a disaster. How do we prevent strong groups like that from becoming a catastrophe? That's the question that we're going to address today, which Joseph Hellerman addresses in the 9th chapter of his book. He suggests there are two remedies to that danger, remedies that must be undertaken. The first is plural leadership. When you have a congregation where there's one person who's the king of the rock, it can become a disaster. Is it always a disaster? Of course not. But it invites trouble. And one way to prevent that is plurality of leadership. You have a number of people who are the ones who teach, the ones who make decisions, the ones to whom people go for counsel. You don't have a king of the rock. You have a committee or a group of people who handle spiritual leadership. Plural leadership, he says, is absolutely necessary. He makes a strong case for it, that it's also a historically attested model. And he gives 6 things that are reasons why plural leadership is important. First of all, it prevents abuse. It prevents the Jim Joneses and the other people who are not as disastrous as he, but still, they abuse their people with pulling authority trips on them. They abuse their people by manipulating them out of their money. Secondly, thing that plural leadership helps to prevent is celebrity worship. How many congregations are there where people only go there because of the celebrity who leads the place? I'm not going to name any, but just turn on your television. You'll find it every day. And many of you have visited or continue to visit places where the congregation is very much this one teacher's fortress. You got to beware of celebrity worship. Thirdly, plurality of leadership helps to prevent imbalance. Every spiritual teacher has his hobby horses. I have mine, everyone has theirs. And if you have plural leadership, you end up having a more balanced diet of teaching. But if you have just one person, he's apt to just constantly be hitting on his own pet peeves, his own hobby horses. Fourthly, it promotes accountability. When there are a number of leaders, they act as a check and balance on each other. To an extent, eldership does this, of course. And in a properly understood eldership, the leader might be the first among equals, but they're equals. Number 5, it models family dynamics. If we're talking about family dynamics which deal with consensus and deference to each other and accountability to each other, and we end up having a leadership structure in our congregation where there's one guy up there on top who's accountable to no one that we can tell, who just claims to be only accountable to God, that contradicts the whole model we're trying to implement. So it models family dynamics to have a plurality of leadership. Number 6, it prevents pride on the one hand and discouragement on the other. On the one hand, a leader who has other leaders who also teach and who hold them accountable will not be as given to pride. And also, if you're melancholic like I am and you're given to discouragement, the other leaders will hold you up. This is 6 good reasons why we need a plurality of leadership. And I'll bet you that most of you have not experienced that. We all should. So that is one safeguard against abusive, cultish leadership in a strong group model. Here's the other safeguard that he discusses: servant leadership. We must constantly dwell on the fact that the purpose of being a leader is to serve the people. Yeshua said of himself, I am among you as one who serves. If I, your Lord and your teacher, have served you, washed your feet, then you should wash one another's feet. Wow. So we have Yeshua's example. He says the leaders of the Gentiles lord it over one another. They love to be in charge. He says, but it will not be so among you. Among you, he who is greatest is he who is your servant. We need to stay attuned to that model of leadership. Yeshua's teaching and also his example. Paul talks about it in Philippians 2. Have this mind in you, which was also in Messiah Yeshua, that though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, being taken the form of a servant, and being found as a servant, he humbled himself even to death on a cross. So Yeshua's example and Yeshua's teaching root us in servant leadership. And Paul says, imitate me as I imitate the Messiah. He was the servant of his congregations, and he pointed to other people. He said, imitate this person who also sets that kind of example. He modeled it and he taught it. So these aspects of servant leadership, if they are rooted in our congregation, they will help to protect us from cultic abuse. And also, plurality of eldership will protect us from that. We need strong group congregations that have a strong bond with each other, that have a strong sense of camaraderie, where people are accountable to each other, where they respect leadership. But we also need safeguards to prevent abuse. And Hellerman, to his credit, talks about these 2 safeguards: servant leadership and plurality of leadership. What do you think? Let me know. It's good being with you again. And Shabbat Shalom from Interfaithfulness, where we're building bridges, where history builds walls. Shabbat Shalom.